To go forward, we talked to editor and investigative reporter Nate Monroe about how investors say they were defrauded and why it all ties back to Jacksonville's corrupt failed sale of JEA. Then, after 4 decades as a hospice nurse, her legacy lives on in a posthumously published book about death, fate, and what she believes awaits us all. And from Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker to Dickens on Center, we preview 2 classic Northeast Florida holiday celebrations. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways to connect with us. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump will speak in central Pennsylvania tonight about the economy. In a wide-ranging interview published this morning in Politico, Trump insisted that he gives the U.S. economy a huge A+. He says the current economy is one that he inherited from the Biden administration, but the most recent numbers show the inflation rate in September was the same as President Biden's last month in office. The president has changed his position on releasing the video of a second strike on a boat in the Caribbean. That September strike killed 2 survivors of an initial attack on the boat. The administration claims it was carrying drugs. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben has more.
Last week, Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he had, quote, no problem with releasing video of the second strike. However, in response to a reporter's question, he denied saying that and said he's deferring to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Whatever Hegseth wants to do is okay with me.
He now says it's under review. Are you ordering the secretary to release that full video?
Whatever he decides is okay with me.
Trump went on to insult the journalist, calling her obnoxious and a terrible reporter. Hegseth's role in the strikes has come under increasing scrutiny after members of Congress on key committees viewed the video of the second strike behind closed doors last week. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News, the White House.
A federal judge says President Trump's executive order blocking new wind energy projects in the U.S. is unlawful. NPR's Giles Snyder says the president signed that order on the first day of his return to the White House.
U.S. District Judge Patty Saris of Massachusetts ruled in favor of a coalition of 17 Democratic-led states in Washington, D.C., calling the executive order arbitrary and capricious. The directive has put the permitting process on hold for the past 11 months. Judge Saris said the indefinite pause violates a statutory requirement that federal agencies conclude work on such matters within a reasonable time.
NPR's Giles Snyder reporting. More than 20 Democratic-led states say they won't give the Trump administration the personal data of people on SNAP food assistance. The administration has threatened to yank funding from states that don't comply. NPR's Jude Joffe-Block has more.
The states pointed out a federal judge already issued a preliminary injunction in October which blocks USDA from withholding funding from states that don't share the data. USDA has asked for items such as SNAP recipients' names, home addresses, birth dates, social security numbers, income information, and immigration status. The states say they object to the federal government collecting Americans' personal data without a clear need for it and cited legal and data security concerns. They suggested sharing de-identified data instead and asked USDA to answer a number of questions, including whether it can confirm state SNAP data won't be used for immigration enforcement. Jude Joffe-Block, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. A $1.5 million donation ensures continued support for a Florida State College Jacksonville initiative that offers accelerated career-related training for high school seniors. WJCT News, 89.9's Michelle Corum reports.
The grant shores up FSCJ's Stepping Stones Workforce Development Program for another 3 years. The program is for Jacksonville area seniors graduating from low-income, high-needs schools. Yabsira Mulu was a senior at Baldwin Middle Senior High School in 2021. She was a first-generation college student and needed help opening doors to college. Mulu applied for the Stepping Stones Certified Nursing Assistant track. The summer after high school, she took classes at FSCJ, half online, half in the classroom.
I remember being so nervous because I was never exposed to anything like this at all. I didn't have internships or anything like that throughout high school that could have ever exposed me to anything like that.
She earned her CNA certification, went on to Florida A&M, and is now a clinical care specialist in Tallahassee.
They were there every step of the way. and more, after 4 years after, to this day, every year they call me and make sure I have everything I need.
The anonymous gift will pay for student financial assistance, classroom supplies, certification testing fees, and background checks for those going into healthcare-related fields. Michelle Coram, WJCT News, 89.9.
47 degrees and cloudy in Jacksonville.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, allegations of fraud on top of fraud. We discuss the claims in an investor lawsuit against Florida Power and Light and how the case is rooted in the largest fraud case in Jacksonville. Later in the program, a palliative care nurse's third book explores life on the verge of death. But first, an astonishing opinion by the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals late last month revived a seemingly dead lawsuit against FPL and its parent company, NextEra. The opinion reverses an earlier dismissal of the case and brings potentially enormous consequences for the nation's largest power company. Here to talk about it is Nate Monroe, executive editor of the nonprofit news site The Tributary and former investigative reporter and columnist at the Florida Times-Union. Nate, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Ann. It's always a pleasure.
So why, first of all, are FPL investors suing the company? Why is this lawsuit filed in the first place?
Gosh, that's a good question. This lawsuit sort of capped off several years of controversy involving Florida Power and Light. There were a series of news stories throughout 2022, 23, across the state that the Florida Times-Union ran, the Orlando Sentinel ran, the Miami Herald ran, about, I guess you could call them dirty tricks that Florida Power and Light is accused of having participated in, concerning elections, concerning the effort to buy Jacksonville's public utility, JEA, and in sort of campaign finance allegations. And throughout those headlines and throughout those years, the company vigorously denied wrongdoing, always denied having any involvement in these kind of alleged dirty tricks. I think they put a lot of responsibility for some of the things that were reported on a political consulting firm that they had hired at the time called Matrix LLC. Matrix is a Birmingham-based political consulting firm that does work for utilities in the South. And I think, it looked for a long time like Florida Power and Light and its parent company, NextEra, had sort of moved past a lot of this controversy relatively unscathed. This lawsuit got filed by a couple of pension funds in South Florida. These are kind of typical plaintiffs that you see in litigation like this. And these plaintiffs basically said, hey, we don't think that Florida Power and Light was honest with its shareholders about the kind of exposure it had concerning some of these allegations, particularly some allegations that NextEra violated federal campaign finance laws. We can get into some of that, but it's complicated stuff. And so, a crucial episode in this litigation and a crucial episode for this company. In 2023, at the very beginning of 2023, Florida Power and Light announced that its CEO, Eric Szilagyi, was retiring. This was viewed as a very abrupt, very unexpected announcement. And a lot of analysts very quickly made a connection between Szilagyi's exit from Florida Power and Light and these controversies. In the same day, the company filed a risk disclosure that seemed to acknowledge that the company had a little bit more exposure than it previously had concerning some of these allegations of dirty tricks. And so that's really what these shareholders have kind of glommed onto to say, hey, the day you announced that Szilagyi left, the company, a lot of stock value got wiped out that day, and that's our money. And had you been more transparent and upfront, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, that's kind of in its essence, that's sort of what this lawsuit is literally about.
And it's FPL is a publicly traded company, so they're required to make certain disclosures,
Right.
and some of those federally required disclosures come if there's something that has happened to the company materially, if there's a significant announcement that could impact the value of the company. And the retirement of a CEO is certainly among those things that would be a required disclosure. This one was an unanticipated retirement of the CEO of the company, and this additional information that they were perhaps going to be bearing some legal exposure.
Yeah, I mean, it was like they announced that their CEO is leaving, and then there was this kind of second disclosure that was sort of, oh, by the way, that campaign finance stuff, we can't really guarantee that we're not going to be held liable for that, and there's this investigation, and we don't know how long it's going to take. And so I think that again was viewed, at least certainly by these shareholders, as an effort to kind of clean up past statements that did not quite acknowledge that level of exposure.
And so this lawsuit was filed. This lawsuit was essentially dismissed by the judge who was overseeing the case, Judge Eileen Cannon. She's actually the same judge that eventually, kind of put to rest the documents case and the Mar-a-Lago documents case involving the president. She's a Trump appointee, and she dismissed this case with prejudice, meaning they can't refile, but they did appeal.
They did, and this appeal took a long time. You're right that Cannon dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice. She was very unimpressed with these allegations that the company was not transparent. She did not find that the company's kind of exposure statement the day that Szilagyi left was all that different from their kind of previous disclosures. And so she really closed the book hard. As you said, she dismissed it with prejudice, which means you can't refile the case. So these plaintiffs took it to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is, what you do when you lose at the district court level. This appeal took a long time. And I think that I and some other people who keep an eye on this thing in these developments with NextEra had sort of forgotten about this lawsuit. I did not feel like this had much of a chance. This is really complicated litigation around really esoteric legal issues. There's a lot of jargon in here. But man, we were taken by surprise. I mean, this 3-judge panel for the 11th Circuit wrote a lengthy and really pretty conversational opinion overturning Cannon's dismissal. And we were talking about this before the show started. I mean, I think you can read into this opinion a kind of tone of almost awe, like a kind of awestruck at the list of allegations that have been lodged against Florida Power and Light.
It does seem like they had a little fun. So this is a 3-judge panel of the 11th Circuit, and it includes a name that is familiar to some in this area, Judge Gerald Toflat, who wrote the decision and was joined by a couple other judges on it. But he writes that at the beginning, he says this lawsuit, quote, has it all, and then goes on to list corporate malfeasance, bribery, off-the-books record-keeping, surveilling journalists, creating ghost candidates, corrupting independent media outlets, and a failed acquisition that spiraled into 2 federal indictments. That, of course, a reference to the failed sale of JEA.
Right.
So there is an element of kind of just rapt attention to all that was involved in the allegations here, and it was a broad and complicated story. You joined a couple other journalists on this program back in May 2024, and so if people are interested in a really deep dive into all of this, that would be a good place to start. But this ruling essentially says there's enough there for this case to at least proceed to the next stage, that they didn't find the Judge Eileen Cannon's decision persuasive when she said that she didn't think that there was enough connecting this enormous $1 billion of stock that were lost in after the announcement as connected to the disclosures or the previous allegations of fraud.
Yeah, and I suppose to be clear and also to be fair to NextEra, the judges, while this opinion does, I think, have some fun with the allegations that have been lodged against the company, they're not making any judgment about the truth of those allegations, right? They're sort of this stage in this litigation, they're kind of accepting this stuff as true without really interrogating it.
And they kind of have to, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how you sort of move past this stage. But what they did sharply disagree with Eileen Cannon about is the idea that the company statements were really consistent, which is kind of what Cannon said, is like, oh, they were clear with shareholders that they face some exposure. I don't think that there was a game being played here. This 3-judge panel says no. Their denials were absolute for all the time that this company was in the kind of media spotlight. But they changed their tune. I think that was even the exact verbiage, is like these company officials changed their tune the day that Szilagyi retired, and they acknowledged a much broader and kind of less abstract risk that they faced that they had not disclosed before.
And subsequent to that, there was also information, I believe, that you first reported about the nature of the severance agreement with Szilagyi, which basically said, hey, if for any reason you're later, indicted, convicted, or, plead to, or anybody related to you pleads to anything like a felony related to your conduct running FPL, we're going to claw back that severance. And that was something the judges also pointed to as a suggestion that things had changed in terms of the company's response and what it had publicly acknowledged about the scandal, as opposed to just these firm denials. They were now opening the door perhaps to the possibility that there could be charges brought.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in real time when Szilagyi's retirement was announced, kind of scrambling to figure out what all of that meant. And I think a day or two after that, finding some analysts who saw the clawback clause and raised concerns with the company about what that meant. And so, that ended up becoming, and that is a somewhat significant part of this lawsuit, is like, is this clawback provision typical for NextEra executives who are leaving? I never found a similar clause. There are documents where publicly traded companies have to disclose the compensation packages and whatnot for some of their high level officials. And like, I'd never come across something like that and wasn't able to find anything like that. And I think some kind of stock analysts did not believe that this was a typical provision to have in an exit agreement. And so it raised questions about, yes, like the level of exposure that NextEra thought it really had.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Tributary Executive Editor and former Florida Times Union columnist Nate Monroe about a recent court decision in a lawsuit against FPL and its parent company. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways that you can connect with us. We've got a call from Denise in Mayport. Good morning, Denise. Go ahead.
Hi. So as I understand, this is a civil shareholder lawsuit, but now that it's been reinstated and the 3-judge panel used terms like bribery and malfeasance, what is the possibility that criminal charges could result down the road?
Thanks for your question, Denise. Nate.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, again, to be clear, these judges were not weighing in on the merits of those allegations. This opinion does quote at length from the allegations that the plaintiffs made against the company, which are all based on things that newspapers publicly reported for the most part. So these judges aren't saying bribery happened, but they're saying that there are allegations of these things in the ether. I don't know. I think that it partly feels like the window for criminal investigations has passed a bit on a lot of this stuff. There were some campaign finance allegations that the Federal Elections Commission deadlocked on last year. The commission has an even number of Democratic and Republican appointees on it, and the Democrats wanted to advance an investigation into these campaign finance allegations. The Republicans didn't, so they deadlocked and it died. That is apparently a pretty common thing that happens at the FEC, or it was at the time. We never heard and don't know whether any, federal investigators looked at this NextEra stuff. I would be hard pressed to think nobody looked at anything just because there was so much noise around this, but the company's never been accused of criminal wrongdoing. And that's where we are.
I should say we did reach out to FPL just to let them know we were going to be talking about this today, invite them to join the program, and we have not heard back. And so while we don't know anything about, any criminal investigation necessarily of the company, there were these peripheral indictments and convictions related to the issue of ghost candidates. And that was sort of the campaign finance question, was whether FPL had been paying a consultant, which in turn was sort of putting money in dark money PACs to employ people to run for office to unseat people that FPL didn't like.
Right.
And one of those people was a guy who's now running for Attorney General, Jose Javier Rodriguez. He was on this program last month, and he actually spoke about it. He was the target of this ghost candidate scheme because another person with the last name Rodriguez was inveigled to run against him. There was a 30 some odd vote difference, and the sort of fake Rodriguez candidate ended up getting several thousand votes. And so that was significant enough to get him out of office. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Even though the voters were the victims, I was the target. And I think what I like to talk about on the campaign trail is, why was I targeted? Well, it came out that, through discovery in a separate civil proceeding, that the CEO of FPL had it out for me. And for good reason, because there was nobody else standing up for the forced customers of our electric utilities more than I was in Tallahassee. I was a thorn in their side. They're constantly trying to shift costs onto consumers, constantly trying to just take over everything. And I had filed a bill about allowing for more competition.
So, he had been, as he said, a bit of a thorn in their side. There was this document that was released in which Szilagyi said to one of the Matrix operatives, "I want you to make his life a living hell," seriously, about Jose Javier Rodriguez.
I think it was an email to some FPL employees, I think. Maybe Matrix people got included on that. I don't quite remember. What I do know, we interviewed Eric Szilagyi at one point during the course of a lot of this controversy, and that he did not like JJR is confirmed. I mean, we showed him that email, and he looked at it and said, yeah, maybe I should have phrased this differently, but he did not dispute, the basic substance of it and the reality of it, which is that they did view JJR as a thorn in their side, and they did not like him.
So to bring it back home, I mean, this is a case that was covered by other outlets in the state, but the root of it in many ways was here in Jacksonville. Can you remind us how the JEA sale folds into all of this other matter?
Yeah, I suppose the Cliff Notes version is that there was, of course, this effort by the last mayoral administration and some of their appointees at JEA to sell the utility to a private operator. NextEra and Florida Power and Light were viewed as the sort of obvious acquirer of the utility. I think they were viewed as the leading bidder. They did make an $11 billion bid to buy JEA. And a lot of these allegations, or some of these allegations, center on a couple of kind of dirty tricks that Florida Power and Light's consulting firm, Matrix, is accused of having deployed. One of those was an effort to get a member of the city council, and like JJR, an FPL kind of thorn in the side. It was an effort to convince that council member to get off the council by offering that person a job with a kind of sham nonprofit. The other sort of major allegation is that they had me surveilled at one point. And Yeah, who was writing things that the company did not like, and we know with pretty reasonable certainty that they did not like the things that I was writing about.
Yeah, I mean, we should say that your name is mentioned in this 11th Circuit Appeals Court opinion. It was mentioned a number of times in the documents filed in the JEA corruption case because that reporting was so elemental to sort of, our community's understanding of what was going on. And then ultimately the evolving scandal that was prosecuted. So JEA was a part of this, but the JEA is not, as we know, currently any part of what's going on with FPL. I mean, I asked that in part because we have an email from Ricardo, and he says, any thoughts on the revived corruption suit against FPL and how this might expand what is known about the failed JEA sale beyond Zahn?
Well, look,
Aaron Zahn being the former CEO who is now in prison.
Right. I mean, I suppose where we go from here is, NextEra has already filed, for a rehearing en banc, so they want the entire 11th Circuit to kind of reconsider the appeal. Whether they grant that or not, who knows?
And just to be clear, that would be beyond these three judges that made this decision. It would be all of the members of the
which is that's a big panel. That's rarely granted, but this is also a weird, complicated case, and who knows with the judiciary these days. I think the significance of this opinion, in a lot of ways, is that if you can survive a motion to dismiss in this kind of business litigation, that's when you get to discovery, right? Like that's when you get to the good stuff, and that's when the plaintiffs would be able to start issuing subpoenas for NextEra to start turning over internal corporate documents. Now, the company probably has a very strong interest in settling this before it got to something like that, assuming that this decision stood. But having said that, I mean, that's the thing. That's where we would learn more is, discovery, then filings start happening. And these plaintiffs, to win in this lawsuit, if it's not settled, they have to, as this 3-judge panel said, prove fraud. And proving fraud means that they would have to prove that the company knew that it had exposure to all of these different controversies beyond what they acknowledged.
Would they also have to prove that those frauds existed?
I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Okay. Well, it's obviously a case that you'll be following closely. We'll be following through you vicariously, but we appreciate all your reporting on this. Nate Monroe, executive editor at The Tributary. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Up next, a hospice nurse's legacy lives on 3 years after her death. We'll tell you about her newly published posthumous book. Welcome back. A book published posthumously with the help of family and friends represents a local hospice's nurse's third exploration of life on the verge of death. Here to talk about it is Melody Simmons, a journalist and editor of the new book, Whispers from Heaven. Melody, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
We're also joined by the legend Dottie Dorian, triathlete, philanthropist, and friend and former colleague of Trudy Harris, author of the book. Welcome back, Dottie.
Right. Thank you, Ann.
So, Dottie, you used to work with Trudy. back in the day. You also were a nurse back in the day. Tell us a little bit about her. What was she like as a friend? What kind of hospice nurse was she?
Right. Well, Trudy was a neighbor and a very good friend. And I first really met her just down the street from us because I took care of her father-in-law as a hospice patient. And Trudy was very helpful and everything else. She's a lovely person to begin with, her Irish spirit and her religious background, Catholicism, and she's just a wonderful person. But anyway, while I was taking care of him, everything went well. And when he passed away peacefully with the family, I said to her, Trudy, you'd be a great hospice nurse. And she said, oh, no, Dottie, I could never do that. So anyway, that changed rapidly. And she became one of the finest hospice nurses that we have ever had. And then not only that she was a great nurse, she cared about everyone. She followed them through everything and never gave up with the family and everybody else. And she became a great fundraiser. She got into development, and she actually raised about $60 million for hospice.
And she's responsible in a lot of ways for the current facility that Community Hospice has, the Hadlow Center, which I believe is where she passed away herself.
Yes, that's correct. And she also had the Nerviser Center and everything else. And when we went from Hospice of Northeast Florida, which is how it started, into community hospice and palliative care today, she helped develop all of that and moved along. She helped us with legislation. She helped us with just about everything. Yeah. And she's so compassionate and caring that the patients would continue to, families would continue to see her and keep contact with her after she had left. But she was there for many years, and she's devoted, one of the most devoted nurses I've ever known.
And you say this book notes that there was, before there was sort of a community hospice and people were just, expected to take care of their loved ones in their homes. That's how it was done. But you say people back then even called it hospice. They didn't even know how to kind of pronounce it because it was such a foreign concept.
It was a foreign concept, and we had problems everywhere when we started, because the doctors thought we were stealing their patients. The hospitals didn't want us because they didn't want our dying patients. And then we had lawsuits and various other things. So every time it seemed like we turned around, we had some other problem. And then we had to lobby to get the rules and regs set up for hospice as it should be, as it is today.
So, Melody, in this book, it's clear that her patients and their families really stuck with her well after her caregiving had ended. I mean, these are letters that are from people that perhaps years before, worked with her alongside her as she cared for their dying family member and are still reaching out through these letters, which strikes me as really just a testament to kind of how extraordinary she was.
She was very gifted and had the ability to draw that connection with, with her patients and also with their family members as well. And we see that on the pages. And in her first two books, it became very clear that the stories needed to be told. She was a great storyteller, but also a great caregiver as well. So the marriage of those two was very, very successful for her.
Yeah, and you mentioned she had two prior books, and so this was the third, and she passed away before it could be completed. The task of finishing it, in a lot of ways, fell to you and this, group of allies. So how did you approach that obligation?
Well, at her funeral, I spoke with her husband and I said, I'd like to try to take this over the finish line because she had this manuscript for many years and then was never able to get it published because COVID hit and, the industry, the publishing industry kind of went into a free fall. Everybody was in lockdown and then she got sick. So it didn't really have a good path toward publication, but the stories were so good, and they also picked up on her first two books. So it allowed kind of a trilogy, almost to be put out of her life's work and her career. So we were able to. George said, "Yes, run with the ball," and I did. And it was just so great to shape the stories up. get them in, better ways to put out in publication. We added a few. Dottie added a chapter. I added a chapter. Another friend added a chapter, and toward the end, and then we finished. We figured that we'd like to end this book with Trudy's story and the story of her passing, and so that led to interviews with her sons and with George, her husband, and we were able to tell her story at the end.
The story, the book in general, is full of religious passages. It is very much, I think, a reflection of how strong faith was in her life, and also, pretty much, I think, thematically, there's stories of people having some sort of encounter with their loved one after their death, sort of a vision or seeing them. I think that's something that Dottie also shares in her story in the book. Why do you suppose that is such a common theme? Do you feel that is sort of a universal experience, or is it something specific to people who've kind of had that hospice experience?
I think that it's very mysterious. I think what we've seen is that a lot of people say that there is a tipping of the wings, and we don't really know much. We're mere mortals, but I do know that these stories do have common threads, and the caregivers see that firsthand. Dottie and I were talking, and we were saying they're woo-woo stories, and so it's kind of funny that way. But it's also a matter of great faith, and that is Trudy in a nutshell. Trudy was a woman of great faith. And so because of that and her caregiving experience, she was tuned in on a certain level that allowed her to see the full story there with everybody. And she talked very freely with family members and with patients about the end, about crossing over, about life after death. And she really never feared it. Yeah. So it was very natural for her. And she also put pen to paper and was able to put it out there so people could read and experience it as well.
I think part of it, you could comment on this, Dottie, since this was your work as well, but people who go through a hospice experience also have an opportunity to talk to their loved one before they die and sort of ask about that. Are you going to come back and give me a visit? I mean, so those are conversations that actually happen and might make people a little likelier to look for those things.
Right. Well, I had an experience with my own husband who died about 4 years ago. And I held him in my arms. Of course, we were at home, comfortably at home. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, I love you till we meet again. And he was gone. And then I like to tell people that because, being a Navy town as well, that, we always would say, till we meet again, we never say goodbye. So anyway, it was very significant for me. And I still, every now and then, will see him somewhere. I saw him one morning at breakfast. And of course, people think, oh, yeah, you're a little cuckoo, And so I have to tell them, no, that's very common. And patients would tell me, oh, I've seen so-and-so and this and that. And it's all absolutely true. And anyone that's been in grief and gone through the grief process and everything, that does happen. And it's absolutely wonderful. And it's very reassuring.
Yeah. And you have also wonderful stories about your mother in this book. And the work that she did, which some of it was just so fascinating as a time capsule, talking about how she would knit winter gear for soldiers in World War II, mittens that didn't have a thumb or a finger so that they could shoot their weapons, but still be warm.
Yeah, we are almost convinced that we could have filled our whole house with what she knit. But then World War II, we did everything. We sacrificed. And the interesting thing is I'm just writing an article on this, on childhood memories of World War II. But anyway, that we never heard a complaint from anybody. I don't know what would happen today if you said, oh, you don't have enough green stamps to get a piece of meat. Or you better go out and pick up milkweed pods because we're putting them in life jackets. And we sacrificed everything. It was just the way it was. And I never heard anyone ever complain.
Well, I look forward to reading your article. And, it's always great hearing your memories. This book is full of them. And so congratulations on the book, Melody. Thanks for doing this today. Dottie Dorian, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being
It's always
here.
a pleasure. And Anne, you're just the best prepared of anyone that does any commentating.
Well, that is very.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, a score that became a Disney classic and a famed Hallelujah chorus are among the Jacksonville Symphony's performances of holiday and not necessarily holiday music. Welcome back. The Jacksonville Symphony unspools a mix of holiday classics and beloved classical compositions in a whirlwind of upcoming performances. Here to talk about it is Courtney Lewis, music director at the Jacksonville Symphony. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning, Anne. How are you?
I am wonderful. We are also joined on the line, actually via video, by Avery Amaro. She's a soloist performing Ravel's Scheherazade.
Correct.
Thank you for being here, Avery. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hi, Avery.
Hi, nice to see you.
You
I
too.
didn't
Can't
even be
wait
here.
to see you very soon.
It will be soon.
know.
So, Avery, you actually made your professional role debut with the Jacksonville Symphony Orchestra in the role of Carmen. And so this will be a bit of a homecoming for you. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward. It was a really good experience doing Carmen, so I'm happy to do some more French music with you guys.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about this performance. It is songs, music based on sort of the Arabian Nights, the 1001 Nights. And so you embody a series of characters, a variety of sounds. How do you approach all of the different elements of this performance?
Yeah, so it's the first song is very much about, the Arabian Nights story. Kind of, it's very word painting. It's not really so much like a story as much as it's like kind of like fantasy and word playing. And all the songs, they're all different. And there's 3 songs in each piece, and they're all dealing with escapism in some way. And it's kind of like a diminuendo from like a big fantasy, like in the first Aziz, which is talking about all the different places of Asia and like really being very descriptive about like what they could be, but not the truth of what it is necessarily, but the fantasy of it. And then the second one is like talking about another fantasy, but that's still a bit more real. And the third one is a fantasy that's almost completely interior. So it's very interesting to kind of do this kind of decrescendo down, which feels very French too. This kind of like anticlimactic subtlety of like what it means to like explore escapism.
So, Courtney, this is a busy time for you. You are just coming back into town. You have got a series of performances, even overlapping performances coming up. So you have the Messiah in the Jacoby Hall. You've got the First Coast Nutcracker in the Moran Theater. And I guess the orchestra is kind of divided on these?
Yeah, we split the orchestra in 2 this week. So I'm doing Messiah in Jacoby Symphony Hall, and right across the road, across the hallway in the Moran Theatre, the other half of the orchestra is playing Nutcracker with our assistant conductor, Nazir McFadden. So it's a really busy time of year. And then the program that Avery is talking about is the following week, December 19th and 20th, when we go back to some French classical music after our holiday whirlwind.
And there's also holiday music mixed in the performance that Avery is a part of. This is sort of, you're going to be playing elements of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker.
Right. So the program on 19th and 20th is a French program all about different pictorial music. So it starts off with The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which your listeners might know from Fantasia, the Disney movie. It's the scene when Mickey Mouse tries to control a mop and all the buckets of water fly over everywhere. So that music. Then Debussy, L'après-midi d'un faune, Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faune, and La Mer, his big tone poem about the sea. Some little bits of Nutcracker that you might not hear in the concert hall usually, and then the Ravel Scheherazade, which Avery is singing. So that's December 19th and 20th, but this coming week is Messiah and Nutcracker.
What do you look forward to with Messiah? This is obviously the kind of famed Hallelujah chorus. It is, a familiar sound to people. It is so deeply associated with the holiday season. And people really look forward to it. Do you as well?
I do, and I took a year off last year. Didn't conduct it here last year, and I really missed it. For me, the moment that really says Christmas is one of the soprano recitatives when she sings, "And there were shepherds abiding in the fields, feeding their flocks at night, and the angel of the Lord came upon them." And the whole heavens open up with a chorus of angels and trumpets off stage. And that means Christmas has arrived for me. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into it. Tonight, we start this evening. So busy week.
Oh, my goodness. And so what is it like to split the orchestra? How does that actually work to divide? How do you choose who's on? Do they get to pick? Do they get to choose which one they want to be?
No, I
of?
usually pick, to be honest.
Okay.
So Messiah is written for a smaller orchestra. It was written in the 1700s, so orchestras weren't as big. So we have about 35 musicians playing that. And then for the Nutcracker, the other half, we use an orchestration that requires fewer instruments than usual. So we can literally divide our 70 musicians in two.
Avery, you're a contralto. You have a range of, a broad range, I should say, but I'll let you tell me more about that. Do you have a preferred style of music? When we talked about role playing, but you also do a lot of concert stuff. You have performed professionally at the Metropolitan Opera. You've performed, music with the Boston Symphony. What is your preferred style? What is your preferred stage?
I like to have a variety. I think what's really nice about my job is that I can control my schedule. So I like to have a mix of some opera where I can get really into a character and do acting, which is a big part of my job that I really love. And then it's nice also to kind of have these concerts, which are usually a bit quicker and a bit more intimate because there's less going on and more just immediacy with the audience. And what's really nice about this performance of Scheherazade is that I get to have that immediacy with also in a song cycle, not something like Messiah, which I've done many times and is a great, great piece. That's a bit more that's a bit more kind of regimented, where this has more room for interpretation, something like Scheherazade. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. So I don't have a preferred stage. I have preferred pieces, I guess. I like to do the music I like to do. And in regards to my voice type, I think it's just when we talk about contralto versus mezzo versus soprano, we're talking about where the color blooms the most. So for a soprano would bloom on the top, and a mezzo, which means middle in Italian, in the middle, and contralto alto is on the lower. And I think for me, it's definitely blooming a lot in the lower, but the range should be equal for most of these voice types. Yeah.
You mentioned French, singing in French. How different is it to be performing in different languages?
It depends on the language. So I think something like French, something like Italian is easier because it has like very smooth and connected the way the vowels are, and it lends itself well to singing. English is also easy for me because it's native. Whereas things like German, Russian, Czech, I've sung in, these things are a bit harder. But I have to say, I'm preparing at the same time now a role, Didon in Les Troyens. And I've been doing lots of French music, and I'm really finding it to be my favorite, I think. Even though I do like Italian and English, and I do a lot of Baroque repertoire with these languages. But this kind of French music that I've been going into is, I think, where my future lies.
Well, Avery Emerow, thank you for joining us. Courtney Lewis, the events kickoff. It's December 12th, 13th, 14th, and then the following weekend, the 19th and 20th for the Nutcracker and Sorcerer's Apprentice. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. Star V Learning Center provides online and in-person instruction in technology and Microsoft programs. More information at starv.tech or call 564-9500.
Hey, it's Ray Magliozzi from Car Talk. Tired of all the excellent programs on this station? Well, sign up for NPR Plus, dive into the Car Talk archive, and you'll be cured of that feeling lickety-split. Seriously, make the year-end decision to sign up for NPR Plus, and you'll get exclusive content from all kinds of NPR shows, including me taking new calls, and you'll be supporting the station. Here's how.
Visit wjct.org/donate.
The U.S. is ready for war with Venezuela, with more than a dozen warships and 15,000 troops now in the region. The Trump administration says it's about drugs, but regional experts say that's just a cover for something else.
People don't realize that Venezuela has the largest amount of oil on the globe.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Republicans are targeting bail reform and pushing to keep more defendants awaiting trial in jail. It's all part of a broader tough on crime agenda. But opponents say stricter pretrial policies lead to overcrowded jails and more plea deals. We unpack the latest debate over the centuries-old practice, overhauling the bail system, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It's a holiday festival inspired by Charles Dickens' most optimistic book, A Christmas Carol, and it will soon transform downtown Fernandina Beach. Here to tell us about Dickens on Center is Madison Josa, the Director of Public Relations for the Amelia Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome back, Madison.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Well, it's great to see you. This event is in its 11th season now. It is definitely a beloved and well-known festival. But take us back a little bit. What was the goal behind its creation originally? What inspired the original Dickens on Center?
Yeah, absolutely. So 11 years ago, we identified this as a need period, to drive people into the shops, the restaurants, the hotels during a slower time of the year. And obviously we have to put our Amelia Island spin on things. So, taking after, the British flag that was flown, one of our 8 over the island, the name of the island after King George II's daughter, Princess Amelia, we thought, all right, let's put a Victorian spin on things. So that's when Dickens on Center was born, and it's in its 11th year now.
Yeah. And so the city itself has this kind of aura about it. A lot of, Victorian era buildings still exist, and the bed and breakfast scene, there's kind of this element about that anyway. Obviously, Florida's not going to be a white Christmas, but you do manage to sort of transform the feel into something that was of that period. I mean, as I said, without some of the more dispiriting elements of Dickens, but this is, the more hopeful version. And it is, I guess, a big deal for the people who live there, but also a big boon for merchants.
Yeah, absolutely. The Victorian charm of the island speaks for itself, like you said. We have the beautiful architecture and just the charming downtown. There is snow, obviously artificial, but we really do make things magic. And this year we are welcoming back over 100 vendors, local and, in the Jacksonville area. So always great for them to really drive business into their small businesses this time of year over that few day period. And people love to see that their favorite vendors are returning to do some Christmas shopping. So it's really great.
So a lot of vendors. Let's talk about it. I mean, so there's the Christmas market, but there's also this illumination procession. There's days of events. There's a fun run, the Run Like the Dickens fun run. And then there's Dickens at night or Dickens After Dark.
Yes. So Dickens After Dark is sold out. That is a fan favorite.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
It's a 21 and up VIP masquerade ball. But really the fun starts on Thursday, and the festival is free. So on Thursday, we'll do an illuminated procession in the evening, so everyone walks downtown in their Victorian garb. And there's a drone show over the harbor. And then Friday afternoon, the festival opens up. All the vendors will be there. There's another drone show. There's live entertainment on multiple stages, food trucks. Saturday, there's a pet parade, which is my favorite. Everyone dresses up their animals and they strut down Center Street. There's a fun run. There's an Enchanted Village igloo experience that you can book. So there is truly something for everyone and lots to do for families.
There's also a Santa Claus, right? People can do pictures with St. Nick. So there's some practical work you can get done if that's on your agenda.
Yes. And you can still go and book that. So a lot of families love to come knock out their Santa photos with their kiddos. We've got a kid zone. There's movies showing every hour. So truly, you can't be bored. There's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. And the snow globe thing that you mentioned, that is something that you do have to make a reservation for, but it's basically a kind of a walk-through experience where they've created these snow globe scenes. Is that right?
Yes. And so you actually can go hang out at the Portly Gentleman Tavern and have a drink and still be in the atmosphere, even if you didn't book one. But it is a 75-minute experience. Each globe has a different theme, and you get to hang out in there and have charcuterie, and there's snow, and it's really magical.
And so you've got some busy days ahead. I mean, this event gets rolling Friday, as you said. What more have you got to kind of get together?
We've already started. This is truly a year-long thing in our office, so we are just excited to get things rolling. Like I said, Thursday we'll be down there handing out lanterns. Everyone's going to line up on Center Street, and you can stroll. There's going to be music and food trucks, and the whole downtown is lit up this entire month into January, and it's truly magical.
Yeah. Good time to get your costume together.
Yes.
It is Dickens on Center Festival. It is in downtown Fernandina Beach. It runs Thursday, December 11th through Sunday, December 14th. And as Joseph said, it's free. We've got a link on our website. You've got a link on your website. But Madison, Joseph, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.
Oh, you the same. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you missed anything, you can find all of our past and current shows at firstcoastconnect.org. And while you're there, you can sign up for our new newsletter where you can get daily show updates, including a breakdown of upcoming guests and topics delivered to your inbox every weekday morning. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Coram, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow for our monthly sit-down with Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan when she talks city business and takes your calls and questions. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Tidbits, family owned and operated since 1985. 4 locations, Bay Meadows, Hendricks, Mandarin, and now Fleming Island. Menu items include fresh sandwiches, salads, and soups. Open Monday through Saturday. Online ordering and menu at clarastidbits.com.
This is WJCT News 89.